I would not say that it was unexpected. If you look at what the Trump administration have thrown at South Africa over the last few months, they've never even treated their enemies like that, let alone their allies.
Let's bring in John Battersby, who is a South African politics expert. He joins me here in the studio. Really good to see you, John.
Thank you.
Initial thoughts on this. We knew it might be tense. Donald Trump has made this accusation of genocide against white farmers, which is unfounded, has largely been rebutted. He has made that accusation before. But even you, I presume, were surprised at the strength of the vitriol from Donald Trump today.
Not really.
Oh, interesting.
I would not say that it was unexpected. If you look at what the Trump administration have thrown at South Africa over the last few months, they've never even treated their enemies like that, let alone their allies. Expelled the ambassador, cut all the aid, refused to attend the G20 in Summit's Head in November, which was originated by America, and South Africa has to hand over to America. So, you know, it'll be a terrible blow to the G20 summit if Trump is not there. Of course, he can change his mind, as we know. But it was inevitably going to be a tense encounter because, Trump and his colleague, Elon Musk, who's a South African and who is particularly ill-disposed towards the current government, have been going on about the Afrikaners, and so forth. And it's not that it's completely without foundation, but the charge of genocide is completely ridiculous.
Okay, which is the targeted,
yes,
basically white farmers, South African farmers being targeted because of their race.
Deliberately killing white farmers and implying that the government has some role in that. The problem with Trump's understanding, limited as it is, of South Africa, is I don't think he knows the nuance of the difference between the opposition and the government. Julius Malema has indeed been on platforms singing...
Who is leader of the opposition?
A leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, which
party.
is one of a minority party. He has indeed been singing songs about killing the Boer, killing the farmer from platforms, and that's hugely problematic.
And that featured in the video Donald Trump played.
It featured in the video, and Trump is quite entitled to comment on that. But the Afrikaners, farmers, and so forth, who have suffered a disproportionate number of deaths over the last 30 years. There's no doubt about that.
Why?
Because they are vulnerable to crime because they live out of
isolated.
The centres, yes, isolated in the rural areas. And there are probably elements that are loyal to the likes of Julius Malema and the minority Zuma party, the MK party, who there would be a grey area there between whether the criminals is it just straight crime, wanting to get their things, or is there a political element of them wanting to get the farmers off the land?
Because they're exasperated with how long it's taken for land to be reappropriated?
Yes, there's frustration there. But the charge that the government is involved in seizing anybody's land is completely incorrect. Yes, the government has passed a law which allows, in certain very prescribed cases, for expropriation without compensation, but that would exist in most countries in the public interest.
That is the legislation which is currently being considered, but not enacted yet?
No, it's been passed, but not acted on.
Okay.
There haven't been any action in terms of that legislation. And my understanding is that legislation is largely to enable the government to actually deploy their own land, because up to now the government has actually, in terms of the technicality of the law, have had to buy their own land in order to deploy it for other purposes. Now, under this bill, they will be able to do it much more quickly.
So redistributing land to black farmers
and for black
from
occupation.
The government, okay,
yes,
without compensation, but we're largely talking about government land there.
Largely talking about government land, and there were arguments in Parliament about, that might be the intention, but that could be used by future populist president for other purposes, and that I think there are some checks and balances against that in the legislation. But certainly the intention of this government is not to seize anybody's land.
Okay, all right. So you fact-checked that for us. You've dispelled some of the concerns. There are more white farmers being killed than black farmers in South Africa. Or are they Are they thought to be wealthier? Are there more white farmers on large estates than on black farmers?
There are more white
bigger
farmers.
Target for robbery.
There are more white farmers than black farmers in South Africa. But if you look at the overall victims of crime, and South Africa is something close to the murder capital of the world, 70,000 murders last year, the vast majority of those victims would be black. But in relation to the farm killings, probably the majority are white of farmers who've been
70%
killed.
of farmers are white. So you can... OK, so look, Donald Trump has clearly taken this upon himself as an issue to raise. But we've been discussing on the show this evening that it comes... Really, it sort of must come coupled to the wider context, that this is how Donald Trump will be doing his global diplomacy, that he's dissatisfied with South Africa entirely, and this is the subject that he's chosen to go in on. But South Africa is a member of BRICS. That includes Russia, that includes North Korea as well.
Not
North Korea. Sorry, it's
Russia, China, Brazil, and a number of other countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE.
Yeah, and obviously Trump has a big beef with China. One of our correspondents into tonight's show saying all this does is it sends South Africa, all of this vitriol from Donald Trump, sends South Africa more into, further into the arms of China.
Not necessarily, because the undercurrent, which was not discussed at the press conference, but will be discussed at the lunch when they meet, and their private meeting, there are a lot of potential mutual business interests between South Africa and America. America is South Africa's largest trading partner. And there are 600 American companies, plus the big blue chip companies from Amazon to Citibank, the whole lot are involved in South Africa. So there's a very established relationship that underneath the tension of the last few years, which is over South Africa siding too much with China and Russia in the view of America, and too close to Iran, and Hamas and so forth, and particularly South Africa having taken the initiative of accusing Israel of genocide at the International Court of Justice, has particularly got up the nose of the Trump administration. But you must always also remember that Elon Musk is looking to get his Starlink satellite internet system into South Africa, and he's been going crazy because they'll only discuss it with him if he's prepared to cede 30% of the company to Black Empowerment body in South Africa.
Okay, all right.
But I think you'll see movement of that after this meeting. I don't think the meeting was all negative. It was a press conference, remember, what we saw, not a meeting.
Yeah, and what came later was more conciliatory, as we understand it. Look, you visit South Africa often. You're highly connected there. How are South Africans digesting this evening's event?
Well, there will be many different reactions, because South Africa is very divided over this whole issue of this refugee offer to Afrikaans farmers, which is seen in South Africa broadly as a complete hoax. Actually, nobody really believes it, but it does represent a minority of Afrikaners who do feel threatened because of the crime issue, and some of them have taken that up. But the majority of Afrikaners would be let's say another minority of Afrikaners would be wanting to disassociate themselves from these Afrikaners who've taken the offer of refugee. But in the middle, if you like, kind of silent majority would not be saying anything, but they would be kind of quietly hoping that the ultimate outcome of this will be that America and South Africa find each other in a way that America can share its technology for fighting against crime, which came up quite a number of times in the press conference, and in the Western Cape, I know that they are using some American technology in the fight against crime. So a lot of the speakers were saying we need America to help us fight the crime and create employment, so you don't have all the crime in the first place.
Look, so interesting, John. Thanks for coming in this evening. Really appreciate it. John Battersby, a South African politics expert, has been with us here in the studio.